maybe just then just ask someone who's got that. It'd be good to see where that person is located. But congratulations, you have won. Okay, now what I want to do now is we've now created a kind of clear understanding that a lot of you, and the vast majority of you, agreed with all of those statements, apart from the one about GDP. So I'm just kind of summarize. Okay, so what you've all said collectively is that we have an economy that's set up like I suggested in those questions there. So I want you to think about this economic framework and this idea of creating and using the donut. So how do you create a brand new economy? How do you transform an economy if, as all of you have said, those things are true? Okay, so I want you to think about that. And I'm going to summarize what you've all said. So we've said we need a new economy. We need an economy based much more on well-being. We need an economy that doesn't spend so much time thinking about resource use and profit and growth. Okay, but what we've set up in this economic framework is that money is finite. Okay, so there's some kind of limit of money. At some point, you can't just keep creating money. You're saying money is finite. You're saying that bonds and taxes pay for all of the government spending. Okay, you've said that the government, or it was about 50-50, well, actually, it was still more in favour, actually, but you've said that the government can run out of money and it can go bust. And we've agreed that well-being doesn't particularly link to GDP growth, but again, there was a 50-50 on that. And you've agreed that banks can only give out money that they've already got in saving. So that's the type of world that we've all agreed we have at the moment, and that's the type of economy we all have at the moment. So we've all agreed on that. We've all kind of pictured. Now, what I would like you to do is think about how you deliver a brand new economy, like a donut economy, within that framework, or what we could call constraints. Money is finite. Bonds and taxes pay for things, so government services can only be paid for by taxes and bonds. GDP is not particularly good measurement, but it's what we've got at the moment. Banks can only give out money that's already in their vault, and the government needs to be careful because it can go bust. Okay? Now, what I'd like you to do is have 5 minutes in small groups. Okay, you can look to the person next to you or behind you, or 2 or 3 of you can get together. I don't mind. If you're online, we've got little breakout rooms, but I want you to spend 5 minutes in thinking that if that's the economy we have at the moment, how difficult is it to do this type of new transformation? How difficult is it to create this new economy? And before you end that little conversation, I want you just to agree what number you want to come back with. So you don't need to feed back. This isn't the objective of the exercise. It's not to feed back to everyone else in the room. I want you just to have a conversation and then think of a number. 1 being impossible, it just could not happen, and 10 being this is really easy, it could happen tomorrow. So with this type of economy, how difficult or easy would it be to deliver a donut economy? 1 being exceptionally difficult with this economy, 10 being, yeah, relatively or very easy with this economy. Okay, now I'm going to give you a few questions which will help you kind of help you with the conversation, but that's what I'd like you to do for 5 minutes. Okay, so have a think about how do we pay for the changes to the system? What role does the government have? What roles do individuals have? What about banks? What are they doing? Who pays for these changes? How quickly can we move? Who is rewarded in this type of economy? And how do we measure success? So use those few questions to get going, to find out how difficult or how supportive this economy is. And at the end, I want you to come back with a number between 1 and 10 to tell me how supportive you think that framework is to a transformational economy like the donut economy. Does that sound okay? Everyone happy with that? Yep, we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Thanks, William. Do you want us to create breakout rooms here?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, just two lots of, whatever, 8, 9, or 10.
Yes, great.
William, can you hear this? I'm doing it.
William, are we staying in a group with you here?
I think we're going into breakout rooms.
Could you share the questions?
Yes, I've shared them, so I'll need them to share them. I've got them on screen.
I've got them as well.
Oh, who's trying to control?
Did you also share the questions from the quiz, William?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to remember.
I would fervently disagree with some of the answers, so I'm just interested.
I'm glad that's the case. Well done. We'll get to that. Here's the. Yeah, I can only share one thing at a time. I've got the questions for the attendees to ask.
Are you able to type them in the chat or not? You see the chat?
Well, look, what I would say was the discussion is, how do you create an economy if that's correct? Not is that correct or is that wrong, but how do we create an economy if all these things, like everyone, the majority of people have said in the room, are actually happening? And that's that.
Sure, it's just reminding us of exactly how that was framed. Thank you. Thank you.
But it doesn't look like they're able to allocate room. So why don't you have a conversation here?
We were just in a breakout, but somehow it worked.
Ah, right, okay. I'd been put in the breakout, had I?
But yeah.
I don't know. We've just got 5 minutes, so we can just start. I think for me the easiest question is how quickly can we move? And does anybody disagree about starting immediately?
Ruth, what I'm trying to say is, how easy is it to start immediately if that's the economy that we have?
Yeah. I mean, I would suggest incrementally rather than a huge leap. But if we are beginning incrementally, that's and do we need a testing phase? So were we to establish how we're going to measure success and determine a scale to work within and a time frame to work within, and then to evaluate it. And then for evaluating it, who's going to evaluate as well? Like, who's going to be involved in assessing the results? Because we would need the community, the banks, economists within that. Yeah.
I think
don't just put your hand up. Just jump in. Yeah.
William, I was going to ask, based on the survey we just took, I'm still trying to process the survey that you gave us, which was, I'm trying to understand, like, I could have answered true or false for most of them. So I'm sort of trying to kind of think of, like, you've given us this survey, which seems very like black or white. And so that sort of shows that our mindsets around what's possible and not possible needs to shift. Does that make sense? I'm trying to understand, I guess the survey was to kind of play with where our mindsets are around our perceptions of the economy.
Well, there's only one part of that was not black or white, and that was around GDP. But the other 4 questions, there's a definite yes or no answer to those 4 questions. So, the government can't go bust, or the government can go bust. There's a definitive answer to that. There's a yes or a no. And the same with all the other ones, there's a yes or a no, whereas GDP is a little bit more, well, it depends how you measure it and who do you mean by well-being. But what I've tried to do is to create this is the economic framework that most people think exists. So if how difficult is it to get money if the government can run out of money, and that the banks only give you money that savers have invested? How difficult is it to spend? Where does money come from if the government needs to tax you as a person to spend, or the bank needs to loan its money and it can only loan that from the money that's in the vault? So there's an understanding of the economy at the moment which makes a donut economy either harder or easier. I don't want to lead you, but if this is the economic reality, how difficult is it to achieve something like the donut when we all know that we need to spend more money, create a lot of different processes and institutions and all these types of things? So I'm just trying to set this up as the understanding of the economy at the moment, and then I'll kind of come to the other part of it later.
Will you give us the answers? Because I think part of me trying to understand now relating to Doughnut Economics, sorry, everyone, was just, I don't know if I'm right, because now I'm trying to process, my brain is trying to catch up on whether I was caught out right or wrong to understand how to apply to this.
Yes, I am going to give you all of that. I've basically set up a little bit of a straw man. But if those, and finally, before we go back in the room, it's just really, the economy I've described creates a condition for something like a transformational economy to happen. Is it harder or easier if all those things are true, which is what the audience has all said? That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. If all those things are true, how difficult is it to transform the economy? One being really impossible, and 10 being actually not that difficult.
I'll have a go at answering in terms of the GDP and the well-being. If we're taking the idea that that is true, that GDP is counter to people's well-being because it has incentives for things like arms trade will go up and that'll increase GDP. Things like war means that GDP will go up. So that's probably a really clear example of how GDP as an incentive is in conflict with people's well-being. If we're thinking about it on an individual basis, so we're thinking about how people are in their own environments, and we know that it takes a culture of people to make change and to lobby for change. It kind of then depends on where you were situated in society and how much leverage and power you have individually. So I think a lot of people, from the things that I was talking about earlier with access, if people have very, very little access to political voice, or they have very, very little access to the infrastructure that they need around them, for those people to organise, obviously you want to organise and you'll have the desire, but you'll also be finding it very, very difficult to have a say. So I think it takes communities to recognise folks within their communities that don't have that power and to kind of shift the power a little bit. But the odds are stacked against people. So people that are a little bit more comfortable or who have a little bit more leverage, I think we talk about, how we share out things in the donut economy. So something like that, sharing that out would be a way of approaching it, sharing out that political power. So that's something perhaps that speaks to GDP versus the wellbeing economy. But I think on that point particularly, it's very, very difficult when we look at it on a people and a human level, and also an environmental level. You know, if your environment is very, very precarious, you don't have a lot of infrastructure, and you don't have rights to things that are fundamental human needs like food and water and shelter and safety, trusted relationships with people in political power and things like that. Very, very difficult. So it kind of depends who you are and where you're positioned. If you work for, if you're the CEO of a big bank, maybe you can change how things are done. If you have, political influence within business, you can perhaps change how things are done, but the infrastructure is stacked against you a lot of the time, and you need to change the culture and thinking around that infrastructure to make change.
I would completely agree with that, Rebecca, but I would also add in having time to dream and time to think, and just as just knowing how hard people are working within this circular economy and within the rat race of life, and the pressure, meeting the pressure to pay bills or to complete all the tasks that employers put on your shoulders. Again, that's removing the energy from people, and most people are I think are just knackered at the end of the day, and maybe want to spend time with family or pursue a hobby or something. But it's absolutely vital that as a society we have time to self-care, but also with that self-care comes this opening up of the mind to possibilities, to others. You kind of look around you. I mean, I think that could be structured into the plan in terms of what you're saying about helping others. I think it's in most people, only they're just too tired or too overwhelmed to do it. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Ruth. William, we've got a lot of discussion going on here, and lots of interesting questions raised, thoughts shared from the room. But I think you can carry on, William, with your presentation.
Okay, great. Have you got me now then? So am I back? Fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, great. And well, really the objective there was I really wanted to all just to talk really freely about the economy as you see it, and how difficult or easy you think it would be for us to achieve a very different economy. And I think most people would agree that if we were to run our economy like the donut, it would be very different. Okay, so those were the questions I kind of said. Those things can help you have that conversation. But I did ask you if you could put an understanding of how difficult or easy you think it would be if those were the constraints of our economy to create a donut economy. So if anyone did get to a number, if you could just drop them into the chat, or if you're in the room, if you could stick your hand up and I can see some of the answers. But did we think this was easy, or did we think this was difficult? Okay, so in summary, in summary, what we've done is as a room, we've all agreed that.
William, sorry to interrupt you. The students are saying it's so difficult. It's difficult to give it a number. One person has rated it 2, but they think it's next to impossible to get this rolling.
Okay, great. Okay, so we've got those questions that we answered, and we all came to an agreement of what the economy is at the moment. And what I would like to summarize is that we've said that with the donut, we need a transformational economy. And you really need to think about, if that is the case, then, you know, look at these questions. How do we pay for those changes? And what role do governments have? And if we were to go through them, we would see that the understanding of the economy at the moment is that, as you've all said, that it's not the government that pays for things, it's taxes. And the government needs to be very careful because it can run out of money and it can go bust. So we have to rely on individuals and citizens and business to play for this type of transformation. And what I wanted to show to you is that our understanding of the economy at the moment is that it's down to individuals and business, because governments can't spend much money. They have to be very careful of what they spend. Now, what I want to present to you is another economic framework. Okay, so you were all really good there at thinking, how difficult is it with all these constraints? Now, what I want you to think about now is, imagine that all those things that you said were true were actually false. Okay, so in summary, what if taxes weren't needed to pay for things, but governments could just simply create currency to purchase or pay for the services that they needed? What difference would that make to achieving something like the donut? So what if taxes actually didn't pay for things? What if governments just paid for things by creating currency, and they were able to do that for all of the things that they bought? Would that make the donut easier or more difficult? Okay, so that's the first one. The second thing, what if governments didn't need to borrow any money? What if the shortfall between taxes and what they spent, they didn't have to borrow because they just spent? They didn't need to worry about borrowing any money to make up that gap. What if government bonds were just there as a way to control interest rates and actually didn't earn any revenue for the government? So would that make the donut easier? So in summary, if the government could just spend and didn't have to worry about taxes or worry about borrowing, would that make the donut easier to achieve? Okay, that's two questions. The third one, what if the government could never go bust? What if it could never go bust? The UK government could never go bust, right? What difference would that make to achieving something transformational like the donut? Because the government's not like me and you or a household. The government creates money. Where does all money come from? Either from banks or from the government, who give banks the right to produce currency. But the government is the monopoly issuer of the currency. What if they could never go bust? Does this make the donut easier or harder? Now, we're looking at GDP. What if we actually acknowledged that GDP was doing nothing for our well-being, but was in fact damaging our well-being, and we stopped looking at growth as the thing that our economy does, and we actually looked at redistribution and much better measures of well-being? How much easier would the donut be to achieve under those conditions? And then finally, what if banks were able to just give money to anyone who walked through the door who had a good idea and that they were confident would be able to pay back the money? What would happen if they just went in and said, if you've got a good idea, here's the money. We don't need to go and see if we've got the money in our vault. What if we just give you the money now for your good idea? How much easier would the donut be to achieve under those conditions? Okay, so I'm not going to ask you to have a detailed conversation again, but I just want you to think about this individually and just think to yourself, would this be easier or harder? We've got a first reality and then a kind of second reality. Which one would be easier to achieve a donut economy? So for those online, please drop in if you think it'd be harder or easier under the second economic framework. And again, for those people in the room, just think about those two differences, the questions that you majorly answered true to in the first section, and then this kind of different framework that I've tried to paint for you in the second section. Which ones do you think is easier to achieve, the donut or something like the donut? Okay, so maybe a minute or so just to think about that. And again, Vinishree, if you could take a little straw poll or something from the students and then get back to me. Easier or harder under the second framework?
William, could you share the set of questions from the beginning with the responses? So I can understand what the framing was still. I'm trying to kind of catch up. From the quiz?
Yeah, I can't share the quiz again, no. But I can drop.
Could you write it in the chat, please? Maybe what that framing was. It would help me to understand the second set of questions.
Yep, sure. I'll quickly do that now.
Thank you.
So, William, the second thing that we're thinking about now then is, what if these things were the opposite from what the answers were as correct the first time around? Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
So that would be
what if taxes didn't spend for what if taxes weren't needed to spend? What if borrowing wasn't needed to spend? What if governments couldn't go bust? What if GDP was recognised as being a really poor measure of well-being? And what if banks could just lend without looking at what's in their bank account?
And the question is whether that would be easier or harder to achieve Doughnut Economics.
Yes.
I'm not sure, William, if you're trying to push her into a direction of thinking, but it seems to me that obviously it would be easier because it means that the government will have much more freedom to pay for the things that are needed.
Hi, William. So we have mixed views. Some people have said it's much easier, but they also feel that this is a trick question. Somebody has shared that it is more difficult. The questioning, will the value of money go down? And will the wealthier become more wealthy? How is it going to work? One student here is sharing that, what was it that you shared? Yeah, so she's saying that if we do not give taxes, then, so ideally in the ideal world, she's saying we should not give taxes and the government should take care of the country and of us as students.
Okay, well, brilliant.
That's perspective here in the room.
Well, that is fascinating for so many reasons. Okay, and the first and the most fascinating thing for me is that people automatically started challenging this second economic paradigm when no one came back in the first paradigm and said, well, actually, how would that work? How would this create this? We just accepted that first economic paradigm, that taxes pay for things, borrowing pays for things, governments can go bust. We just accepted that as being true. And it was only when I gave you the second economic paradigm that you started questioning it. And what I wanted you to do was not think about how you do it, but actually think about what would it be easier or harder if this was actually the economic paradigm. And certainly from our group and online, most people have said it was easier. And I think you got it back from the audience when they were like, is this a trick question? Of course it would be easier. Now, what I'm going to share with you now is actually going to be quite difficult for you to kind of understand individually in the room. And that the first economic paradigm I set up for you was completely false. Everything I told you in that list that you all voted for as true was false. So the first economic paradigm that I gave you that you think is a kind of reality is actually a false reality. The second paradigm is how the economy actually works. So I'll say that again. So you all said that it's pretty hard to deliver a donut economy under the first set of conditions, and I agree with you completely. And you mostly said it's easier to deliver a donut economy under the second set of conditions. Now, what I'm telling you is that the second set of conditions are actually how we run our economy at the moment. That is if you have a broader or a deeper understanding of economics, you understand that that is how the economy actually works. So I kind of want to make that really clear, because I know this is difficult for most people to understand. And because I was trained as an economist when I was younger, it took me a lot longer than I think it would take creative-minded people like you in the audience. But what I want to say is that right now, the reality that we have, and I'll just put this up on screen now, the reality that we have is that taxes at the UK level are not needed to pay for things, right? That's not how government finances work. And it's unfortunate. I don't think we're going to have enough time for Q&A, but if you're interested in this, there's lots of other resources that you can look at. But I wanted to leave you with this understanding of this is how the economy actually works at the UK level. So taxes are not needed to pay for things. Governments create currency and then spend it. That is how the economy works at the moment. Governments don't need to borrow money to make up any shortfall between the money they spend and the taxes they collect. They don't need to do that. It's a choice, and they borrow for a whole variety of different reasons, but none of it is to fund government spending. And this is, when you understand this is transformational in what you can expect or demand of a government to do. Now, the third point is that governments cannot go bust. The UK government cannot go bust because it creates the British pound. And it's impossible for you to run out of pounds, or it's impossible for the UK government to run out of pounds. So the government, as a currency issuing government, the UK government cannot go bust. It can only go bust if it borrows in foreign currency, where it has to pay off the interest in borrowing in the currency it doesn't create. But it cannot go bust because if it borrows in its own currency, it can always pay off. Now, GDP is a failed metric, and chasing GDP growth is it doesn't reduce inequality, and I think it has caused the ecological and social damage, and that chasing GDP is detrimental to well-being. Now, that's the only one where there's much more of a discussion and a debate around. The other three things that I've said to you are as close to economic fact as you can get, because these are operational matters. This is how spending is done. There's nothing theoretical about this. This is looking at how governments transfer money and how the process of payments in government takes place. And then the fourth thing is that right now, when you go into a bank and you have a good idea, the bank will lend you money if it thinks you can pay it back. It doesn't go into its vault and see if it has £100. So if Rebecca Lee comes in and says, "Can I borrow £100?" They don't say, "Hold on a minute, have we got £100 in someone's savings before we can give you that money?" They actually say, "Rebecca's got a good idea. We'll put £100 into your bank account and we'll expect you to give us £110 back in a year." That's what happens at the moment. So our understanding of money, which is core to at the heart of economics, is based on a kind of false reality that's been built up over the last 40 years. And this idea that the government is like me and you or anyone else in the room. Money for us is a very, very different thing than it is for a government. Now, we can all run out of money. We all have to borrow or earn to spend things, but the governments don't. And what they do is they choose to account for spending, and it's simply an accountancy process by spending and by taxing and borrowing, but they don't need to do this. And the final thing I want to give you is that this understanding of the economy that we started with is really only the belief of one economic school of thought, which is called neoclassical, or you might know it as neoliberal. But of the other 20 or so economic schools, no one puts forward this understanding of the economy. All the other schools understand how the economy works along the lines that I've given you in the second part of this presentation. So you might say, well, economists are telling us this, but it's only a certain type of economist from one school out of 20. Just unfortunately, they happen to be the biggest and the most dominant. But the economy works very, very differently from how we are taught and how we are told that it does. And if we understand that, then we can actually push for change much harder, much faster, because the government is not constrained and banks are not constrained by finances. So, as I said, it took me 2 years to get to this as a trained economist, and I'm not expecting to move you out of this paradigm to another paradigm and you know, in a 20-minute, half an hour presentation. But if you think this is true, or even if there's the slightest bit of doubt that this might be true, then please do go away and look up some resources around modern monetary theory or post-Keynesian economics, or you can follow us at scotonomics.scot, because this is the real world understanding that we're putting forward to try and demystify the Scottish and the British economy. So if you're interested, if you think, oh, if maybe William's not right, but if there's a tiny part of you that thinks that he is, then please go away and try and get a deeper understanding of how our economy works.
There are also some more accessible resources on how this works within the Doughnut framework. If you go onto Deal's website, if you prefer visuals and things like that, that will help you understand things that sound quite dense in terms of words. And we're using words like paradigm, and it sounds a little bit, out of reach for what you can hold in your brain at one time. There's some opportunities to have a look on Deal's website for different ways to think about this, and little videos and things like that.
So I don't know. I mean, I've got a question here for Gemma, and so why do we pay tax? We pay tax for a whole variety of reasons, but none of them is to pay for government spending. So we pay tax, and this gets really difficult and detailed and really into the economics. But we do not pay tax to fund government services. When we pay taxes, that money that we repay is effectively destroyed. If you think of money being not a pound in your pocket, but a digital unit of currency on a spreadsheet, as soon as we repay that money to the government, that digital note of what we've paid to the government disappears. The money isn't collected by someone on a truck and then given to another department to spend. When we pay taxes, the government deletes those taxes. Effectively, those taxes disappear. And this, again, can be something you're thinking, this just cannot be true, but this is what happens. Governments spend money, and then after the spend, they decide on ways of taking that money out of circulation so that they can they control inflation, or make sure that spending goes to particular different parts of the economy. But when governments tax, they simply delete the taxes. They do not use that money to pay for anything. This is at the UK level. At the Scottish level and the local government level, it's completely different because they don't issue the currency. But tax is a way of kind of making sure that everyone takes part in a society. It's a great way to reduce inequality by taxing people who've got more wealth more than people who haven't got wealth. And it's a way of removing money from the economy so that you keep control of inflation. But taxes do not pay for any government spending at the UK level.
Thank you so much, William. This was a brilliant presentation. I think personally it has sparked a lot of curiosity. I have lots more questions now, but to all the people in the audience and to all our students, I would suggest go and look it up, read about it. You must also go and see William's episodes on Scotonomics. He has explained a lot of these concepts in much more detail. I've particularly loved the one on degrowth, William. Really enjoyed it, made me understand the concept of degrowth really well. So go check out, William is sharing links in the chat, but I will share with you all at the end of the day today. So thank you so much, William. We're clapping here. So now I would like to welcome Claire Dufour. She's one of my favorite persons, and she will be speaking about how creativity can spearhead climate justice and develop actions with local communities. She is the creative climate producer of a project called Cultivate. And I had the pleasure of working along with her on this project as one of the creative practitioners. So over to you, Claire.
Hello, everyone. Okay, I'm trying to just share my presentation. Here we are, and then I'll have access to my notes. Hopefully, why is it not working? Oh, well, it all worked before, and now it doesn't anymore. There we go. Sorry,
We can see it, Claire. That's helpful.
yeah, you can see my presentation, but I need to see my notes, and I don't know why they don't appear, because I'm sharing, so they just totally disappeared, which is not useful for me at all. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Vinny, for having me this morning. It's been really fascinating to hear all the talks this morning and having the conversation. So yeah, thank you for everyone who spoke, and for the conversation I had in night. Like Vinny said, my name is Claire Dufour. I'm a white woman with dark curly hair, although they're a bit wavy today, not so much curly. I wear a green woolly jumper, and I had a blurry background, but I decided to actually remove that after hearing Rebecca's talk. I'm actually sitting in my kitchen in Dundee. I feel very tired. I'm quite overwhelmed about presenting online. It's not my most comfortable place. I would rather be in a room with you all, but I'm equally really excited to be here and share about my work and raw learnings today. I think Cultivate has been in so many ways huge lessons on access, and there's a lot to share in there. I'm not an economist, I'm a producer, and I'm really interested in how we live together, organize, and communicate with each other, and how we form communities and shape our society. This morning, I will be talking about our project Cultivate, which we've been running for 2.5 years. Big journey, and it was not so much about changing the economic system or understanding it, but it was much more focused on community resilience and empowerment. And hopefully it's going to give you a bit of in practice, in reality, examples of how the donut economy can be, principles can be applied in real life. It's not going to be interactive neither, but I will hopefully leave some time for questions afterwards, because that's my favorite part of presenting. So I am the creative climate producer at Creative Dundee. Creative Dundee is a social enterprise, and we support creative communities as a catalyst for collective goods through the lenses of justice, well-being, and sustainability. We started as a blog 15 years ago. I should know that. We just celebrated our 15 years anniversary last week. And since we've grown into an organization, but more than an organization, we made of and led by and for the community in Dundee, and we only 6 staff members. This slide is just a snapshot of a significant project, and I thought I would give you a bit of context before I delve into our Cultivate project, because it's just one of the things that we're doing. But we run events, whether online or in public. So on the top left for you, picture right, and that's what we did last week, which are amazing democratic platform when we invite people to talk about anything they want in a very engaging visual way. To working on crowdsourced guides for a city, supporting creative networks and creative spaces. And we're also very excited to be part of a new adventure with 4 other community-led organizations to run a Dundee Changemakers Hub, which is part of the Climate Hub network supported by the government. And it's very much to recognize that people and communities are leading the charge for change. So Cultivate is funded through an emergency funds from the Scottish Government, delivered by Creative Scotland, and bringing together 26 projects under the Culture Collective initiatives or network. So there's a lovely map of all the projects. It's been a really great, amazing journey to be part of that wider network where we've been connecting and learning from each other. And all of those projects have been reaching deep into localities, engaging many communities, including some of the most vulnerable groups, and those especially impacted by the pandemic. And I think at the heart of that, the Culture Collective network initiatives was experimentation. We had a lot of liberty and trust into what our programs were going to look like and what the outcomes we were going to have. And that has led for, some really stunning projects. And it's been just an incredible journey. And I wanted to share the Culture Collective manifesto as well, which I think is something that the Cultivate project have added into, like, was really much part of it, and reflect a lot of what needs to change within our practice of living together and making society. And you know, the ecological system is helping to do that, but you also need to have those values in place, which is about taking time to show up, creating safer spaces to people to come together, a lot about trust and rethinking our metrics like the DGP, for example. So more about Cultivate. So Cultivate is a regional leadership program which supports creative practitioners to engage with local communities on local climate justice issues. The programs included, we're kind of wrapping up just now, 2 runs of 6 freelance creative practitioners commissions in 6 different locations across the 2 regions. He also included a storyteller filmmaker that is documenting the projects and amplifying communities' voices, who's in the room actually today. A peer leadership program to develop and exchange creative, environmental, and leadership and enterprise skills. Including collaboration with our learning and reflecting partner, so that's Stilt, there is an alternative, and they collaborating with us to explore and communicate the learnings emerging from the program. We also had an open community program where public could engage with climate justice subjects and bring their voice to the table. And we've been working with lots and lots of partners. But let me add a bit of colors to that pictures, and I hope all the photos and that slides kind of gives you a flavor of all the things that we've been doing. But it's because it's much more than that, and it's been a really explorative journey as how do we live better on this planet and all together. And it's been done through playing and sharing food and stories and facilitating creative spaces, from making together, creating safer spaces for having non-judgmental conversations. It's been done through sharing tools and skills, learning from our ancestors, creating marble runs, and having gigs in community gardens and so on. A lot have evolved, and I guess kind of not change but grow within this 2.5 years of program, and a lot was around the language that you use, and we kind of recognize that even concepts like climate justice might not be telling the full story or being quite accessible. I really love what Kate was describing in terms of having those intellectual graffiti in her head, and I think that William also like kind of got that in his interpretation as like what is the reality that we accept as true, and how do we change that into in our minds so that we can really imagine the future. So within the program, we change a lot about the language that we were using, and now we're talking more about collectively imagining together through creativity, and kind of trying to look at what are the places of impacts where we are. The program is kind of acting on, and obviously there's the people in communities, and that is all about access, normalized access. There's some conversations that we had so often, but also using culture and creativity as a democratic process and toolkits for change. How do we facilitate safer spaces that are welcoming, more equitable, but also really creative for collective imagination? And how do we build confidence and agency for stronger communities? But there's also we need to grow leadership within our creative sector, and although there's a lot of creative minds in the room, and I'm sure you're kind of behind this idea that this needs to be recognized, but we also need to share best practice with each other so that we can all learn from each other. And how do we work, how organizations or communities that are not in the creative sector work with creative organizations or creative freelancers, but how do we better support or and offer professional developments for those creative practitioners and the wider networks of peers that have always been the most useful mechanism, I think, for learning and sharing and going faster in change, isn't it? And then obviously trying to have influence into the system and policy making, and how do you make a direct impact on decision policy making on the local, regional, and national levels, but also how do we empower and increase civic participation in future making? This is our lovely creative practitioners that we've been working with in the last 10 months or so. I wanted to share that map just to give faces to the project, but also because it kind of really show the extent of it, but and the kind of diversity of practices and interest and passions that those individuals are bringing. I've been tasking them all to think about what global sustainable goals they find closer to the arts, and they wanted to bring within their collaborations with communities. They also helped us a lot change that language and the way we were framing the project. And I will come back to that and share a couple of examples, real life examples, to bring that into color a bit more later on. But what does it all mean in the context of the Doughnut economy, and how does it relate, and what are we learning? And I'll go quickly in that as well, because I think that it does. It's just that the Doughnut economy is not a framework that we've used, but I think it is just naturally used within the concept of climate justice. But what I found really interesting when I was looking at that and preparing my presentation was to be like, okay, so how does it relate and what have we learned? And I think that one of the first things for us was that it was around knowledge. We often assume, or I did, that we all know and understand about climate change, and that how our ways of living and communicating and being together is impacting the planet ecosystem. But there's still a lot to learn, and there's a lot to do. And I think that everyone is in a different stage in their journey of understanding of how they're impacting our ecosystem around us. And that is even before thinking about behavior changes. Access again to climate-friendly projects and practices isn't cheap, and that's not me saying that, is our participants, and it's often not relevant to certain protected groups. Electric cars, for example, are a great example for me, because a lot of people don't even have a car, or don't really have access to a car. So actually public transport should be the thing that we think about. Social justice issues are often combined and amplifying the negative effects and barriers for individuals and economies. The intersectionality of everything makes the conversation more difficult, and it's not, you not just have one barrier to things, it's all the things together. If we want to create a better future for all, we really need to start listening, and properly listening, and embracing the diversity of perspective and experiences and choices, and not go for the fit for all solutions like electric cars, and that kind of like this idea of like we need more diversity in our political voices. And I guess what our biggest learnings in that kind of inside of the donuts is the importance of creative networks and like connecting with each other, and that's what we're doing today, and it's brilliant. And that's what, it wasn't a surprise for us to realize that, but it is really important. And and then in terms of the outside of donuts, which is the ecological ceilings, we obviously had our starting point, which was talking about climate change. Although it wasn't always in practice, I think that our creative practitioners brilliantly starting the conversation and the engagement with individuals in local groups, not on climate change, but on making together and doing craft and sharing food and spaces. And that was a much more better starting point, I guess, for those conversations to then lead on to climate change. Yes, and also creating those spaces to be able to share how much we know, and there's no stupid questions. Waste and pollutions have been I think the most significant trigger points in those conversations, and what people feel is the most visible, and what they feel most connected with, and maybe more equipped in terms of making changes, or maybe not at all, especially when we talk about packaging or that kind of thing. Connection to nature, again, what really makes people really care about the this idea of an ecological ceiling, because if you don't have that connections, then you don't really build the care and the empathy for the planet. And I think that has been reflecting really well in what the people were saying within this project, the connections and the access to land and landscape, and how a person of color can be always asked, oh, but where are you from? And it's like, well, I'm from Scotland, I was born here, and I'm part of that landscape. Please stop asking me that question. And of course, we talked a lot about whose responsibility it is, that responsibility of change, because it needs to happen on a systemic level, but we do have also power of change, and those two things can influence each other. But the agency for change, to demand change and to imagine change, I think has been a really core thing of our program. So yeah, I don't know which slides I'm sharing anymore now. Oh, there we go. So first kind of example of, just to bring a bit more texture into all the things that I was saying. And this is the group that Vini has been working with as an amazing, and this is not even all of them, it's a group of women and their family from lots of different ethnic backgrounds, from Libya to Pakistan to India, and lots of like countries that have been represented, and all of those people living in Dundee, and they've been taking on a journey with Vini to talk about climate change and how does it relate to their life and what they can do about it. And it was really lovely, because what came out a lot of from it is that this idea of wanting to create hope within that change. And this is them holding their exhibitions and really proudly wanted to share what they've learned from their journey. And this is more pictures from the exhibition itself. And it's been a brilliant space, because it was really it was created as a space to ask questions and have conversations. It was really active, and people were invited to create their own response through creative and artistic activities, and then added on the wall with the work of those women and their family. And there was a moment of sharing food, obviously, because food has been a huge element within that journey, and hear them as well feeling empowered and speaking to the crowd about their learnings, and to the point that we even one of them has accepted to speak at Europecha Kucha events, which I've mentioned earlier in my presentation. So imagine 450 people in the crowd, and yeah, Sandra was just brilliant at it, and it was just one of those brilliant example of how someone how project brought those women together that didn't know each other before, and now they go to the stage and tell about their learnings and talk about friendship commitment with our planet, which is, I think, is a lovely way of saying it. And this is another example that happened in Perth. I'll share the wee video just to give you a bit of a feel. So this is a space in Perth High Street. So that's Perth, sorry, and that's the High Street. And that's a project led by Giles Grady over there, who was working with young people. And again, it's been another really great example of how creating a safe space for those young people to come together, mix together, and have those conversations, and being able to be themselves. A lot of, some of them have said that since having access to that space and coming to regular sessions, they have had the bravery to come out within their own communities in terms of their gender identity and that kind of thing. And it's just been such a brilliant thing, and how it animates the high street as well. And then that thing of needing those spaces to create that trust and collaboration that is really needed between people if you want change to happen. And this is just a couple of quotes from how her work has been noticed by Scottish parliaments, but also on the UK level with the Climate Change Committee. And it feels like just a glimpse of understanding from policymakers level of how creativity and participatory arts practice can help in the grand scheme of things. But I think it's a really lovely kind of way of look at it in terms of so just going to read those two quotes, which I think gives a really good insight in what those things could do. So this group seems to be supported and encouraged because they generate the success stories, inspiration and positivity that can instigate and maintain support for climate action. And it's also this idea of being a 2-for-1 contribution So we're not only doing a project that is looking at reducing carbon footprint and etc., but also actually having an additional benefit of those projects around food, money saving, cycling, community cohesions, mental and physical health. And then those projects really immunize the overall journey to net zero and secure public buy-in. So yeah, hopefully we get a bit more of that thing. And I will leave you with my book reference and a bit of a provocation. So this book is, I've given this book to all the critique positioners at the beginning of the journey, but it's also been really influential with my way of thinking and how the change needs to happen in her head before it can happen physically in her physical world. And I really believe that we're living in a major crisis of imagination, and I think that all the talks before I really talked about that in different ways, but really well as well. And I really believe that creativity and hope will play an important role in bringing people together to imagine a better future for all and the planet. So my provocation for you this morning is an open question. What if? Just imagine. What if we stopped staring at our screens and start talking to people in the streets? What if everyone was taken seriously? What if people paid attention, really? What if people listened to kids? What if climate change was an entire subject? And what if diversity and access were concepts that don't need explained anymore? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. That was a very powerful talk, and you left us with a powerful message. So thank you so much. I think all of us are waiting for a break. Should we take a 10-minute break and come back? For folks online, if you could, grab some coffee, and I don't know if you're hungry, grab some food. But one last speaker is left, and we have she's going to share something really exciting with us. So I'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you. Hi, so are we all back? Let me see. Okay. I think the students are back in the studio. Hello, so I think everyone is back. The students are back. Okay, and just waiting for everyone to settle down. Okay, great. So welcome back, everyone. And I would like to introduce you to our next speaker, Melanie Francis, and she's doing some exciting stuff with the donut. So we've heard from, from the economic point of view, we've heard from Claire, who spoke about community perspective. Now let's see what Melanie has to say. I'll just introduce you to her. She's a brilliant game designer, a digital storyteller, and a creative mathematician. So can you imagine that combination? So let's welcome Melanie and hear from her directly. Over to you, Melanie.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Mel Francis. Can I just get a thumbs up that everyone can hear me okay? Thank you so much. I'm a white woman with brown hair. I'm in my early 30s. I'm wearing a red jumper with small silver hoop earrings. And I'm sat in a small office right now, and there's a kind of wooden wall and a kind of plasticky window behind me. I'm going to talk briefly about a project which I'm currently calling the Doughnut, but it's just a working title while I'm still figuring out what it is. And I would say that in comparison to maybe some of the other talks today, I'm very much in progress and at the kind of beginning of a journey of exploring something. So you're hearing about a project in development. But what I hope it's going to be is a playable experience about the doughnut economy. And I'm going to speak, it's going to be quite a short talk for about 10 to 15 minutes with a little bit of time for Q&A afterwards. So I'm just going to share a presentation on my screen. There we go. So it says the doughnut. I'm going to start with a really brief overview of me. So as Vinny said, I'm a game designer, a digital storyteller, and a creative mathematician. I make interactive experiences, live ones and digital ones, that invite people in, audiences in, to play a role. Sometimes that's live theatre performances, sometimes that's books, sometimes that's games. And I like to make things that take people inside places or stories or systems that they might not go into otherwise. That might range from a kind of speculative sci-fi future to a game that brings to life an economic system. And I'm particularly interested as a game designer in kind of systems and making them playful and interactive, so that offer audiences an opportunity to climb inside a model, to experiment, to explore, to see how things could work differently. So the doughnut is hopefully going to be a piece of game theatre using kind of escape room style techniques to explore the doughnut economy. And I'm going to talk a bit about what I mean by escape room style in a moment. Practically, I hope it's going to be for small groups, about 10 to 15 people, take place in one room. That room might change where it's going to be. Take about 90 minutes to experience. Be explicitly for non-economists or people who wouldn't use that word to describe themselves. I think that the show might also not even use the word economy at all. We're talking about it in the context of the word economy today, but might not use that word at all. and be flexible and adaptable so it can travel to people where they are rather than necessarily asking anyone to come to any new location. And be facilitated by a kind of human facilitator, so maybe a performer, and also a kind of screen that helps people keep track of information as well. Players will experience the donut in 3 stages. The first is a brief, then a playthrough, and then a debrief. So the brief introduces players to the game and how to play with lots of space to ask questions. In the playthrough, players play the game. We'll talk more about what that is in a minute. And then the debrief is where we'll probably introduce this idea of the donut economy. So again, maybe not even using that word economy, but that the experience comes first and then thinking about what that means comes afterwards. So in that way, we can connect back to an experience that the group had and then kind of out from what they experienced as a creative piece in the room to political, cultural, social systems. It gives players an opportunity to reflect on how they played and why they played in that way, and to form some connections between the experience of the work and global and local human rights, climate justice, political policy, social context. Again, I'm using these bits of terminology in this kind of presentation now, but the language that we use to talk about those things will probably not be the same language. And one of the really interesting things in making work like this is we can be surprised sometimes how in a game context, where our priorities show up in the playing of the game or kind of the choices that we make. I've made 1 or 2 experiences like this before and have someone come up to me and say, I made all of the choices in that show that I tell everybody else not to make. I found myself doing the things that I kind of warn against. So it's a really interesting experience that can kind of dig into some of the choices that we make and how those things show up. So as an escape room style experience, audiences will collaborate together to complete challenges and solve some puzzles. And that's going to be kind of focused on them completing a task. Now, in an escape room, your task is to escape. You get locked in a room and you're kind of challenged within a time limit to escape that room. In the donut, that goal, that idea of escaping, is going to be replaced with a different goal. And that goal is to bring things into balance, which is kind of one of the ideas that really stuck with me from reading about and listening to Kate and lots of people talk about the donut economy. My hope is that that's going to be a practical task with some seesaws. So in the center of the room, there's going to be a circle of seesaws that need balancing. And all of these seesaws will be out of balance at the beginning of the experience. So some will swing into the center of a circle and some will swing into kind of out of the circle so that the seesaws themselves make a kind of circular shape. And this is kind of intended, my hope is, as a representation of some of the things in the donut, so that you've got these things that are in excess, kind of leaning into the out of the donut. We've got too much biodiversity loss. There's too much nitrogen and phosphorus loading. I've brought up a picture of the donut economy on the right-hand side of the screen here that kind of shows the places where we're not reaching the social foundation and we're in excess of the ecological ceiling. So there are seesaws swinging in that are kind of loose representation of the ways in which we're not meeting social foundation. Seesaws swinging out that are a representation of how we're kind of going over the ecological ceiling. And so over the game, players need to bring these these seesaws into balance. And they can do that by finding counterweights for the seesaws in the room. So they're trying to work together to find weights so that they can kind of rebalance the seesaws and make something that is balanced in the space. And this is where the challenge element lies. So the challenge is about finding these weights and kind of revealing them and unlocking them and putting them on the seesaws. And at the end of the kind of time, at the end of the playthrough, this seesaw donut style shape is tested. Probably with a marble run. That's my current idea, that a marble will be released onto the seesaw. And if the marble can run round, fantastic. If not, there's maybe some chaos where some marbles fall off the seesaw, but there's some sort of kind of representation of the sustaining of something on a balanced seesaw and how hard it is to sustain that same thing if the seesaw is out of balance. So there's a kind of little look at what the seesaws will be. So with all the weights on, the seesaw ring will lie flat and they'll be naturally weighted to lean in and out. And then the marble run will happen in the middle. Over the game, there are going to be some challenges that specifically think about the space of the room in the context, thinking about it as an environment and thinking about relationship to environmental sustainability. So there's going to be probably a puzzle that encourages people to think about the energy they use. So an example of what that might be is that a code to unlock one of the objects is written in UV ink, so you can't see it in normal light. You need a special black light, for example, but that needs to be powered up by a physical generator. So it might be that there's some way in which you need to generate some energy in the space to see something. One of the other ideas is that the space itself, the floor, is made up of carpet tiles. And on the other side of the carpet tiles, there are kind of some shortcuts. There are some clues or hints to the puzzles. And so you can kind of make things easier for yourself by just flipping the carpet tiles over on the floor. But if you flip over a carpet tile, you're not able to move over that tile anymore. You kind of lose access to that bit of floor. So we have kind of shortcuts and then maybe some harder routes as well. But this specific idea of like taking things from the floor or extracting information from the environment means that that part of the environment stops being available to you as you play the game. So trying to kind of bring that idea of extraction into place. Sorry, I've forgotten to bring these things up as I go, but there's some examples on screen just describing in text what I'm saying. So you can lose access to that piece of floor. And in this way, I hope that the Doughnut's going to put its audience kind of in playful dialogue with some of the processes and choices kind of key to climate action and kind of thinking about climate change. So thinking about energy usage and the impact that energy generation and usage can have on people and communities. So kind of thinking about us as people in the way that we're engaging with the energy that we're using in the show. And then is said as well to consider processes of extraction and how these processes do have an impact on kind of where we're able to move, where we're able to stay, especially in the global south, is making environments more dangerous to live in and in some cases inhabitable for humans. Just moving on. So the game is also going to kind of think about global human rights. And again, that's a huge kind of global topic. And then I'm thinking about how it exists and plays into this game piece. And so how players collaborate will be important. All of the group being involved will be important. So there might be an example where a code is sewn into the costumes that everybody is wearing. And so all the players need to come together to share information, to join up the code and kind of solve that puzzle or decode a message. And communication will be key as well. For example, there might be a game where one player has the route through a maze and they have to guide another player who is physically interacting with them. We're going to kind of consider this through inclusion and kind of access to the game. So is everybody able to play the game equitably? Is the group collaborating and communicating effectively? And the game is going to kind of encourage the group to play well with one another. So to communicate effectively, collaborate inclusively, and to take care of one another as they play. And in excluding or leaving out or creating kind of unneeded hierarchies in the space, the game is going to be harder to play. And in particular, I think the digital system will impose some constraints on teams that maybe aren't playing so well with one another. So how you play is as important as kind of what you're doing and how you play this when you're playing through the Doughnut. So the Doughnut is in development, as I've said. It's going to be developed over the next 18 months, 16 to 18 months. The development process is going to include regular workshops and play tests. And this is where audiences will hopefully come in and play a little bit of the game and then talk about what their experience was and talk about how it worked. And this is really key in making interactive stuff or making stuff that reaches people, I guess, to make sure that the audience experience and the people who are coming to the show remain right at the center of it. And the workshops and playtests are hopefully going to make sure that all elements of the game that are crafted are kind of fun, accessible, and meaningful for audiences. And just to give you a sense of where we're going and kind of what's next, the development focuses that I'm looking at will include balancing, hopefully, the beauty and the detail of this seesaw design with something that can travel around to a college or an office or a cafe, and so it can go and meet audiences where they are. So kind of how are those two things being, how is the balancing happening in the show design itself, I guess. Interrogating access in the piece. There can be a bit of an escape room status quo, that the same skill sets and ways of thinking get rewarded every single time. And so how can the challenges and puzzles in this piece center and celebrate neurodiverse and disabled ways of thinking and moving? Embedding a lens of climate justice, and also within the playthrough itself, but also thinking about how the brief and the debrief can hold space for a variety of audiences to look at that together. Developing a fictional frame for the donut, so kind of the world that people come into when they're coming to experience it. And I guess highlighting here that there's power in both it being really close to life, but also that sometimes a fictional distance can give us kind of critical space to reflect on what we're doing and what's going on, and the actions that we take. The distance can be helpful, I guess, in giving us an opportunity to do that. And finally, just making puzzles that are fun and also robust and really bring the donut economy to life. I'm really interested in talking to people about this. I'm still working out what it is. I'm particularly interested in meeting people who might be interested in playing it or exploring it. So if you are one of those people, please get in touch with me. I'll put my email and my website in the chat, and it's on the next page as well. And thank you for listening to this kind of short overview of the donut, which I am currently creating. Thanks.
Thank you, Mel. Did you hear the claps?
No.
Okay, so I'm saying it out loud. We were clapping for you. I think it's such an amazing concept. While you were speaking, I could visualize myself in that escape room, and we're waiting for it to happen. So, but I will share your contact details with the students as well if they want to speak to you about it, get more information, participate. Yes, participate as well. So I will share all the details, but I would like to thank you all for being so patient over Zoom as well as in the classroom. And that is the end of our online talks. After this, we're going to have a couple of workshops after lunch break. But I would like to thank all of you on Zoom, and thank you for staying till the end and celebrating the Global Donut Day, Scotland's celebration with all of us. We are small groups. I think we will be able to share everyone's resources and contacts through email. So I will share it with the team here, as well as the people who participated online. Any last words, Becky? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I'm for last words. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody. Everyone's talks have been fantastic, and I really like it when big groups of people get together to share very, very different ideas and different takes on things, because that is where innovation and more accessibility happens actually as well. They're very, very interlinked things. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody. And hi to all the students as well. You feel we can't hear when you're clapping because Zoom filters out the sound. But we know that you were there, and yeah, shout out to you as well. It's nice to have you with us.
Amazing, thank you. Let's break for lunch.
And thank you very much for everyone. Right.
I think we can leave this room. Yeah. Bye.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Lovely to meet you all. Thank you.